"You are laughing too prettily at my brother's jokes," the Duke of Norbury said, low, catching her wrist in the shadow of the terrace door, "and I have decided I will not stand for it a moment longer." Adrian Vale, ninth Duke of Norbury, had told himself 100 times over the course of the season that Miss Rosalind Carroll was nothing to him. She was a country vicar's daughter with a sharp tongue and a plain gray gown, invited to Norbury House only because his sister had taken a liking to her, and he had spent a fortnight informing anyone who asked that he found her insufferable. He believed it, too, right up until the moment he watched her lean toward his younger brother Julian across the card table, her dark eyes bright with mischief, and felt something in his chest twist hard enough to steal his breath. She had done it on purpose. He knew that now. He had known it perhaps for an hour, watching her from across the crowded drawing room while Julian Golden, charming, harmless Julian, laughed at whatever clever thing she had said and touched her sleeve, and she had let him. Adrian had stood by the fire with a glass of untouched claret going warm in his hand and a jaw set so tight it ached, and told himself it did not matter. Then she had glanced past his brother's shoulder, straight at him, and smiled slow, deliberate, triumphant, and he had put down the glass and crossed the room without deciding to. Now she stood before him on the cold terrace, her wrist caught loosely in his fingers, and she did not pull away. The lamplight from the ballroom fell across half her face and left the rest in blue winter dark. Behind them the music went on, muffled by glass. Her breath clouded in the air between them. "I cannot think what you mean, Your Grace," Rosalind said. "Your brother is a delightful companion. He does not scowl at a woman as though she has insulted his horse." "He is an idiot," Adrian said. "He is charming." "He is 23 and has the depth of a saucer." Adrian heard his own voice roughen and could not stop it. "You do not want Julian." She tilted her head. The escaped curl at her temple stirred in the wind. "And you presume to know what I want." He did not answer at once. He was aware, with a clarity that unsettled him, of everything, the cold biting through his fine coat, the scent of her, some faint sweetness of orange water, the way she had gone very still beneath his hand while pretending she had not. He was a man who prided himself on governing every room he entered, every conversation, every feeling that dared to rise in him. He had governed nothing since the day this woman arrived and told him, at his own dinner table, that his opinions on poetry were confident but incorrect. "I know," he said slowly, "that you spent this entire evening looking at me and speaking to him." The triumph flickered out of her eyes. For one instant, only one, she looked caught, exposed, a girl who had gambled and did not know if she had won or lost. Then the mask came back down, cool and amused. "You flatter yourself, Duke." "Do I?" He released her wrist. He stepped back, though every part of him objected to it, and put his hands behind his back where they could do no more foolish things. "Then I have misread you entirely, and I will apologize, and we will go inside, and I will watch you marry my brother by June." He turned to go. "Adrian." He stopped. She had never once used his given name. In 3 weeks of arguing with him over books and politics and the proper way to ride a difficult mare, she had called him Your Grace and Duke, and once memorably, an obstinate mule, but never Adrian, never that, and the sound of it in her voice on the freezing terrace undid something he had spent years bolting shut. He turned back. Rosalind had her arms wrapped about herself against the cold. All the mischief was gone from her face. What was left was something braver and far more frightening honesty. "I looked at you," she said, "because you never look at me. You spar with me all day, you contradict everything I say, you leave the room when I enter it, and I could not for the life of me tell whether you despised me or something else entirely. So yes, I laughed too prettily at Julian, to see what you would do." She lifted her chin. "And now I have my answer, and I find I do not know what to do with it." For a long moment, the Duke of Norbury said nothing at all. The wind gusted across the terrace, and she flinched from it, and the small human fact of her being cold cut clean through his fine intentions of standing at a proper distance. He thought unwillingly of the whole ruinous fortnight that had led him here. Of the first morning she had ridden out with his sister and taken the sunken lane at a gallop when he had expressly warned her the ground was treacherous, and how he had ridden after her, furious, ready to deliver a lecture, and found her standing beside her blown mare in the mud, laughing up at him with her hair come loose, entirely unrepentant. He had opened his mouth to reprimand her and instead heard himself ask, absurdly, whether she was hurt. She had said, "Only in my dignity, your grace, which you seem eager to injure further," and he had turned his horse and ridden home in silence, unsettled in a way no reprimand could account for. He thought of the evening in the music room, when his sister had prevailed upon Rosalind to play, and she had sat at the pianoforte and made a small, honest mistake in the second movement and stopped, and laughed at herself before the whole company, unashamed. He had watched the elegant faces around the room register the error, the faint, well-bred cruelty of people who never erred aloud, and he had felt, for the first time in years, that he stood on her side of some invisible line, among the people who were laughed at rather than the ones who laughed. He had not understood then why that should move him. He understood it now. "You are shivering," he said abruptly. "It is January, your grace, and you have dragged me onto a balcony." "I dragged you nowhere, you followed." "I followed," she agreed, "because you looked as though you had something to say, and you have been failing to say it for 3 weeks, and I have run out of patience waiting." That silenced him. It was so exactly the truth that he had no defense against it. He looked at her, really looked, the way he had spent a fortnight forbidding himself, and saw that she was not, in fact, as composed as she pretended. Her chin was high, but it trembled, and it was not only the cold. She had gambled a great deal to walk out here after him. A woman in her position, without fortune or family standing, did not provoke a duke's temper for sport. She had risked her welcome, her sister friend's regard, her own pride, on the chance that the thing she thought she had glimpsed behind his coldness was real. The knowledge humbled him more thoroughly than any argument she had ever won. He had rehearsed, over 3 sleepless weeks, a great many speeches. Cool, correct speeches in which he explained to himself precisely why a duke of his standing could not entertain a fondness for a penniless clergyman's daughter who mocked his taste in poetry. He had marshaled every argument. Standing before her now, with her lips gone pale from the cold and her eyes fixed on his face, he found that not one of those arguments would come, and that he no longer wished them to. "When you came to Norbury," he said, "I disliked you within the hour." "How gallant!" "Let me finish. I disliked you," he went on, "because you were not afraid of me. Everyone is afraid of me, Rosalind. My tenants, my servants, half the House of Lords. My own brother steps carefully around my moods. And you walked into my library on your first evening, took a volume of Cowper off my shelf without leave, told me my marginal notes were the work of a man too proud to be moved by anything, and asked whether I had ever in my life felt a thing I did not first approve." He drew a breath. No one had ever spoken to me so. I told myself I resented it. I lay awake resenting it. It was some days before I understood that what I felt was not resentment at all. "Then what was it?" she said very quietly. "Relief." The word surprised him even as he said it. That there was, somewhere in the world, one person who did not require me to be the Duke of Norbury, who saw a man she might argue with and did. He shook his head slowly. "I fought it. I am very good at fighting things. I left rooms. I was cold to you. I convinced myself I found you tiresome, and then I watched my brother touch your sleeve tonight, and I have never in my life wanted so badly to be a worse man." Rosalind let out a breath that was half a laugh, though her eyes had gone bright and wet. "You are the most maddening man in England." "I am aware." "You made me laugh at Julian for an entire evening. My face aches." "You started it," he said, and heard, astonished, the warmth in his own voice, the thing that had been buried so long he had forgotten its shape. He closed the small distance she had left between them. He did not take her wrist this time. He took her cold hand in both of his and held it as though it were something he had waited a very long while to be permitted to hold. "Wrong brother, Miss Caro. You chose the wrong brother to torment. Julian would have let you win." "And you?" "I intend to argue with you," Adrian said, "every day for the rest of my life. I will lose most of them. I find I do not care." He lifted her hand and pressed his mouth to her chilled knuckles, slow, his eyes never leaving hers. "Marry me, not because I am a duke, because I am the only man foolish enough to have fallen in love with a woman who called him an obstinate mule at his own table and was, I concede, entirely correct." She laughed then, the real laugh, the one she had never once given Julian, and it broke on something like a sob. "You concede. The Duke of Norbury concedes a point." "To you," he said, "I will concede a great many. Do not let it reach the papers." Rosalind stepped into him. She was shivering, and he shrugged out of his coat without thought and settled it about her shoulders, and she let him, and the letting felt like a door opening in a house that had been shut against the weather for years. She looked up at him. The lamplight caught the tears on her lashes and turned them gold. "Yes," she said, "obstinate mule that you are, yes." He did not kiss her at once. He held her face in his hands and simply looked, the way he had refused to look for 3 weeks, letting himself take in every particular of it, the small scar at her eyebrow, the stubborn set of her mouth, the warmth rising into her cheeks. Then he bent his head, and the cold and the music and the whole glittering house behind them fell away, and there was only the two of them on the terrace in the winter dark, and the long argument of their lives just beginning. When at last they went in, Julian took one look at his brother's face, at the coat around Rosalind's shoulders, at the hand the Duke would not release, and grinned like a man who had known the ending all along. "Wrong brother indeed," Julian murmured as they passed. "I only ever laughed at her jokes to make you cross, Adrian. You are welcome." The Duke of Norbury, who had governed every room he had ever entered, found he had no reply. He only tightened his fingers around Rosalind's, and let his brother have the last word for once, and led the woman he loved back into the warmth and the light. They were married before the spring. She never did stop calling him a mule, and he never once wished she would. In the years that followed, guests at Norbury House would remark that the Duke, that famously cold and unbending man, smiled most often when he was losing an argument, and that he lost them always to the same dark-eyed woman, and looked, each time, like the winner of them all.